In our journey through life, there are moments when we find ourselves facing deep personal failure. These moments can feel overwhelming, heavy, and isolating. We often feel as though we've let ourselves, our loved ones, and even God down. The weight of our mistakes and the consequences that follow can make us wonder if we will ever find our way back. But in the midst of those moments, when it seems like all hope is lost, there is one truth that stands firm and unwavering: God's grace is enough. It's easy to forget that grace is not a distant concept, something we only think about when we are in church or reading our Bible. God's grace is a gift that is present in every moment of our lives, especially in the times when we are most vulnerable, most broken, and most in need. Grace is not about our perfection, it's about God's unchanging love for us, no matter how many times we stumble, no matter how far we may feel we have fallen. God's grace does not change based on our performance. It is not a reward for our good actions or a consequence of our failures. Instead, grace is a constant, unmerited gift that flows freely from God's heart. When we fail, grace is there. When we feel unworthy, grace is there. When we feel like we've ruined everything, grace is there, ready to lift us up and carry us forward. This is the foundation of the new covenant: grace, given freely, without condition. There is no moment in our lives where we are beyond the reach of God's grace. Whether our failure is a single mistake, a series of wrong decisions, or something that feels like a lifelong struggle, grace still reaches us. Grace does not ask for us to be perfect, it only asks that we receive it, embrace it, and allow it to transform us. The world often teaches us that we must earn love, respect, and forgiveness. We are conditioned to believe that if we work hard enough, do the right things, and avoid mistakes, we can attain these things. But God's love, respect, and forgiveness are not based on our ability to perform or avoid failure. They are freely given, without strings attached. Grace does not depend on what we do, it depends on who God is. As we reflect on the grace of God, we must remember that we don't have to carry the burden of our failures alone. Jesus Christ, through his sacrifice, has already carried that burden for us. The weight of our sin, our guilt, and our shame was laid on him at the cross. His grace was poured out for us so that we could stand free, without condemnation. In moments of failure, when we feel lost and defeated, we are invited to come boldly to the throne of grace, knowing that we will receive mercy and find help in our time of need. When we embrace God's grace in our failures, we are not only forgiven, but we are also transformed. Grace has the power to heal wounds that we thought were beyond repair. It has the power to restore hope when all seems hopeless. It empowers us to move forward, not in our own strength, but in the strength that comes from God alone. God's grace teaches us that our failures are not the end of our story, but rather the beginning of a deeper understanding of his love and mercy. In the process of failing, we learn to rely less on ourselves and more on him. We discover that our worth is not defined by our successes or failures, but by who we are in Christ. Through grace, we are made whole again, not because of anything we've done, but because of everything that Christ has done for us. As we walk through life, it's important to remember that God's grace is not just for the big failures, the ones that others can see, but for the small, hidden failures as well. Those moments when we fall short of our own expectations or when we struggle in silence, God's grace covers them too. We are never outside the reach of his love. Sometimes, we may find ourselves in seasons of failure that seem endless. We may feel as though we are stuck, unable to move forward, always falling short. It is in these times that we must remind ourselves of the truth: grace is not about achieving perfection, but about trusting in the one who is perfect. It is about accepting that, even in our imperfection, we are loved, accepted, and forgiven. When we fail, we often feel the urge to hide, to withdraw from God and from others. We may believe that we need to fix ourselves first before we can approach him. But grace invites us to do the opposite. It calls us to come as we are, in all our brokenness, knowing that God is waiting with open arms. He is not waiting for us to be perfect, he is waiting for us to embrace his grace. It is important to recognize that failure is not something we have to be afraid of. Failure is simply a part of being human. It is not a reflection of who we are, but an opportunity to experience God's grace in a deeper way. Our failures don't define us, God's grace does. We are not our mistakes. We are His beloved children, called to walk in the freedom that grace offers. In times of personal failure, we can trust that God's grace is sufficient for us. His grace is not just a one-time act, it is an ongoing, living presence in our lives. Every day, we are invited to embrace it anew. No matter what we face, no matter how many times we fall, we can always turn to God's grace and find the strength to rise again. And so, let us embrace God's grace in our times of failure. Let us surrender our mistakes, our guilt, and our shame, and let grace wash over us. Let us remember that, no matter how many times we fail, God's love remains constant, His mercy never runs out, and His grace is always enough. In closing, I encourage you to reflect on this truth. God's grace is not just for the perfect or the successful. It is for the broken, the weary, and the fallen. It is for you, right where you are. And it will always be enough. So, in your times of failure, don't run from God, run to Him. His grace is waiting, and it will lift you up, restore you, and carry you forward into the future He has prepared for you. Remember, His grace is greater than your failure. Let that truth fill your heart and bring you peace. God bless you.